to Lesson 7 of Singularity Sanctuary's Ethics and Technology course, Housing, Shelter, Stability, and Human Dignity. When we talk about technology, economics, and ethics, it's easy to drift into abstractions. But there is one human need that brings everything back to earth: shelter, a place to live, a place to rest, a place to feel safe, a place to belong. Did you know that in the U.S. the legal definition of homelessness is an individual or family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence for one or more nights during a year? That is to say, a homeless person is someone who doesn't have a safe or adequate place to sleep. A wise man once said, "Even foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." If we take this peculiar phrase, Son of Man, to refer to human beings in general, as I do, we must conclude that by today's definition, this wise man, whom the story goes was also born in a stable, was homeless. Housing is not a luxury, nor is the need to sleep, and it is one that all of us, regardless of our religion or our beliefs, ought to care deeply about. Housing is one of the most basic foundations of human dignity. And yet, in many of the most technologically advanced and economically productive societies in history, secure housing, a place to lay one's head, has become increasingly difficult to obtain. Rents rise faster than wages. Home prices move beyond reach. Entire generations delay or abandon the hope of ownership. Homelessness persists even where resources are abundant. Over the past century, the world has undergone one of the largest demographic transformations in human history: mass urbanization. In 1900, only about 15% of the global population lived in cities. Today, more than 55% of humanity does, and that number is projected to rise to nearly 70% by 2050. In raw numbers, that means billions of people have moved from rural communities into dense metropolitan areas in search of opportunity, safety, education, and economic mobility. Cities concentrate innovation and wealth, but they also concentrate scarcity in the process. It's the basic law of supply and demand at work. When housing supply does not keep pace with population growth, the result is predictable: rising costs, overcrowding, displacement, and homelessness. Although the percentage of people living in American cities is already 80% of the population, mass urbanization is a global phenomenon, causing housing shortages almost everywhere. From the perspective of the humanistic ethic, this is not merely a market problem, it is an ethical one. If we return to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter sits at the very base. Without stable housing, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to pursue education, meaningful work, health, creativity, or community. Insecurity at the bottom of the pyramid undermines everything above it. A society that cannot provide stable shelter for large portions of its population is not simply inefficient, it is failing in its moral responsibility to promote human welfare. It has a failing government, it has a failing economy, and it is failing as a society. Historically, housing has always been shaped by technology. From early shelters and permanent dwellings to industrial construction to modern infrastructure, innovation has continually expanded our capacity to build. Today, advances in material science, modular construction, prefabrication, automation, and even 3D printing make it possible to construct high-quality housing faster and more affordably than ever before. In principle, we now possess the technical capacity to ensure that no one lacks shelter. So why does the problem persist? Because housing is not governed by technology alone. It is governed by values, incentives, policies, priorities, and perspectives, whether accurate or not. In many societies, housing has increasingly become less a place to live and more a financial instrument. Homes are treated as investment vehicles, speculative assets, and sources of wealth accumulation. Entire neighborhoods become commodities. Vacancy can be more profitable at times than occupancy. From a purely economic perspective, this can make sense. From a humanistic perspective, it is deeply troubling. When shelter becomes primarily a mechanism for profit rather than a foundation for dignity, human welfare is displaced by market logic. This does not mean that private ownership, development, or investment are unethical. They are not. Markets have played an important role in expanding housing supply and improving their quality. But when market dynamics operate without ethical guidance, they tend to concentrate access rather than distribute it. The humanistic ethic does not oppose markets. It insists that markets serve human flourishing. This requires us to think carefully about how technology is used in housing. Technology can enable mass construction of affordable homes. It can support smart infrastructure and energy efficiency. It can reduce waste and environmental impact. It can make communities safer and more resilient. But technology can also amplify inequality. Algorithmic pricing can drive rents upward. Digital platforms can accelerate speculation. Data-driven investment can concentrate ownership. Remote work can displace long-term residents. The tools themselves are neutral. Their effects are not. A humanistic approach asks, who benefits? Who is excluded? Who bears the cost? One of the most thoughtful recent discussions of this tension appears in Ezra Klein's book, Abundance. Klein points out that in many parts of the country, we face a painful ethical dilemma. On the one hand, we urgently need more housing. On the other hand, we want to protect the environment, preserve neighborhoods, and avoid reckless development. So we create layers of regulation, review processes, and restrictions, often with good intentions, but over time, these protections can become barriers. They make construction so slow, so expensive, and so uncertain that very little gets built at all. The result is scarcity, rising prices, displacement, and homelessness. In trying to protect human and environmental values, we sometimes end up undermining them. This is where technology, guided by ethics, can change the equation. One powerful example comes from a company called Icon based in Austin, Texas. Its founder and CEO, Jason Ballard, has been using robotic construction and 3D printing to rethink how homes are built. Ballard points out that the average cost of a home in the United States is now around $650,000, while the median household income is under $75,000. For millions of people, then, ownership and even stable renting has become unrealistic. Much of this cost comes from traditional wall systems, expensive, inefficient, poorly insulated, and surprisingly fragile. So Icon's approach is different. Using large-scale 3D printers and advanced materials, they are now printing walls that are stronger, more energy efficient, fire-resistant, flood-resistant, termite-resistant, and more sustainable at lower cost than conventional construction. What once cost hundreds of dollars per square foot now costs less than drywall. With new AI-powered systems, entire multi-story homes can be printed in a single process. Neighborhoods can be built quickly. Designs can be customized. Waste is reduced. Environmental impact is minimized. This is not science fiction. It is happening now. And what matters most is not just technology, but the intention behind it. Ballard once summarized his vision this way: when you can go from human desire, and that human desire can be made real in the world with robots, that is a formula for having homes that are twice as good, at half the price, and in half the time. That's how we make housing with dignity abundant It feels more human, not less human. It feels like we can shape this world to uphold our highest ideals and deepest values. And that world is not in the future. We are taking orders on it today. That is the humanistic ethic in action. Technology serving dignity. Innovation serving inclusion. Efficiency serving compassion. This is what becomes possible when we refuse to treat housing as merely a commodity and instead see it as a moral foundation for human life. Stable housing is not merely about physical structures, it's about psychological security, social belonging, and moral recognition. People who lack stable housing experience chronic stress. They struggle to plan, to study, to save, to build relationships, and to participate fully in civic life. Housing insecurity erodes trust and hope. When a society tolerates widespread housing instability, it quietly accepts human insecurity as normal. The humanistic ethic rejects this notion. It affirms that every person deserves a stable foundation from which to unfold their life. This does not require identical housing for everyone. It requires reasonable access to safe, affordable, and dignified shelter. It requires zoning and development policies that prioritize communities, not only profits. It requires public-private cooperation. It requires creative use of technology. It requires long-term thinking while also acting with urgency. And it requires moral imagination. We must ask not only what is profitable today, but what sustains human flourishing tomorrow. In an age of exponential technology, housing scarcity is no longer primarily a technical problem. It is a moral choice. We can choose to deploy our tools toward inclusion rather than exclusion. We can choose to design cities and communities for human connection rather than speculation. We can choose to treat shelter as a public good supported by private initiative rather than a prize for the fortunate few. This does not require ideological purity. It requires ethical seriousness. It requires that we remember what housing is for, not status, not speculation, not accumulation, but stability, belonging, dignity, home, a place to lay one's head. In the next lesson, we'll turn directly to artificial intelligence and ask what it means to align powerful new forms of intelligence with human values, responsibility, and care.